First off, I'd like to welcome everyone from coming. We greatly appreciate it. I never expected the turnout that we've had for something like this. A little housekeeping. If you haven't already figured out the doors, there's female bathrooms on to the right and left, and male is down here. The men's bathroom on the other end to the right is out of order currently. Coffee, juice, pastries, anything over there, and exits come out to the left or right. This all came together when I heard Dina on a couple different podcasts, and I really thought we could have a need for this in the Valley. Statistically speaking, the last few years we've had potentially 15 to 20 more first responders kill themselves than LODDs. I know we focus a lot on LODDs as a fire service, and I think a lot of that has to do with the stigma that we attach to suicide and mental health. We're supposed to be the heroes. We're not supposed to need help. And it's very hard for us to go out and say, I'm not right, I need help. Hopefully today we can remove some of that stigma. Dina devoted a lot of research and time into developing a lot of this stuff. Also, we have challenge coins for sale for the event. One side has the premise of empathy and support and everything, and we use the B as an example to basically be there for one another. Bees always look out for one another. They protect each other. It's what we need to do for ourselves. We need to be aware of ourselves. We need to be aware of our counterparts. Look out for one another. Be there for one another. And the hive, the way they build the hive, it's a very strong unit, very strong foundation. And that's what we're hoping to build here today, is start building with building blocks to develop a foundation of mental health and supporting one another. Our speaker today, Dina, she is a captain from Raleigh, North Carolina. She devoted a lot of her master's degree in studying mental health and firefighter suicide prevention, and I'll let her tell her story on how she ended up there. It's a very interesting and very cool story on how she ended up on the topic for her thesis. But she's been with Raleigh, 10 years? 12. She was a police officer for a few years before that, so she's experienced the whole gambit of being a public servant, from the police side and the fire and rescue side. So I'd like you to join me in welcoming Dina to our lovely area.
Thank you so much. Thanks for doing your homework too. Thank you. Can you guys hear me, or do I have to stand over there? I will promise to try to talk loud. I can't stand right there the whole time. So yes, my name's Dina Alley. I work with the Raleigh Fire Department. I've been with them for almost 12 years now. Before that, I was a police officer. We all make mistakes. Some of us figure it out a little sooner than others. Now, honestly, I have, how many people here are law enforcement? Oh, you guys are so outnumbered. Truly, I have the utmost respect for law enforcement, because honestly, I got out of it because I couldn't handle it. Like, I took it home every single night. Did I make the right decision? Who was telling me the truth? And then you go to buy the firehouses and you see that they're watching movies and laughing. Or you go to like a crazy scene and they leave and you're stuck there waiting. So yeah, I was more than happy to take a $20,000 pay cut. But utmost respect, because it is a tough job. I think I made it to the 5-year mark, and I had to make a decision. I can either keep doing this and care just a little bit less so I can not go crazy, or I can go be a firefighter and just have fun. So I chose the easy path, which it turned out not to be so easy after a while. As Brandon said, I did not get into this because it was the flashy new hot subject that it is today. I got into it from personal experience, and a path that just kind of led me. I can't even explain it because nothing was planned and nothing was wanted. It just kind of all came together. And there were periods of suffering and misery that I wished would end, that now I look back and I'm like really grateful for, because if not for that, I wouldn't have the understanding that I have today, and I wouldn't have the passion that I have today. So for me, this all kind of landed in my lap in 2015, which really wasn't that long ago. But if you're thinking firefighter behavioral health, or talking about firefighter suicide, any first responder, 2015, we weren't having these conversations. It wasn't on the radar. It didn't matter. If somebody did have a mental health issue or die by suicide, it was because there was something wrong with that person, not us as a whole. And they were kind of written off and not even talked about, you know. If any of us died by suicide prior to 2015, it wouldn't even be shared on social media or, you know, anything said about that person. They were forgotten. So for me, in 2015, I had just gotten promoted to driver. In Raleigh, we call our drivers lieutenants. So it's a very confusing position because you think you're a first-line supervisor, but you're not really. But you do have say-so over the station activities and the apparatus, and it is that first step. So I had just gotten promoted. I did really well on the promotional test. I worked really hard to score top of the list because I had this idea that as a female, as a former cop, as a younger person, that I had to prove to them that I was good at what I did. So I wanted to make sure that I was top of the list, and that they knew that I deserved it and that I earned it. But unbeknownst to me at the time, sometimes when you push too hard or you do really well, it's actually perceived in an opposite way. So I was labeled book smart. I just want to get promoted, you know, all that stuff that the haters say. And it didn't really affect me too much because at that point I had learned that, unfortunately, you know, this brotherhood that we speak of is not quite the brotherhood that we see on TV or that we see on Facebook. We all know on all ends of this, we're worse to each other than we are good to each other. Does that make sense? Am I making up stuff? I mean, sometimes we're pretty rough on each other. If one person comes into your police department or your fire department, and somebody says, oh, watch out for that person, I heard this about them, how long does it take for everybody to have heard that about that person? And how many people, and how many people will go to that person and say, hey, I heard this, what's up? We don't do that. We are cowards sometimes, myself included, because I've been that person. I've been that person that heard something about, you know, the chief, and I didn't say anything to him because I was afraid to, and I didn't want to be seen talking to him because I heard something about him, and I didn't want to be associated with that. We're good about not associating ourselves with things, which can be hurtful. So it impacted me. So after I had gotten promoted, we did some changes up with our special operations units and whatnot. And I was transferred to Station 17, which previously was just a regular engine, but now it was one of the new SOC companies. And everybody got transferred in on that. And I got moved from A shift to B shift. Right? Thank you. We all know you don't want to go to B shift. Those guys are tough. So I was moved to B shift, and B shift really, historically with the Raleigh Fire Department, they were just tough rogues. A shift, we were the policy following, loving family. I mean, my career up until then was awesome. I had a great crew, a great captain who actually, he told me if I didn't take the test and get promoted, he would transfer me. So he gave me no option, but he really pushed me and inspired me, and I was lucky to have such a good foundation. But when I went to B shift, it all changed, and I was seen as I don't even know, an invader. I don't even know how to put it. I was not welcome with that company. And the ladder crew there, they were a bunch of nice guys, but they were really tough, and they were very standoffish towards me, which I'd been used to. When you are a Muslim female in the South and you work in male-dominated professions, you get used to having to spend a little time getting people to get to know you. So I've been used to it, and I've learned if I'm nice, if I work hard, and if I show that I know what I'm doing, the right people get on board. So I had just developed that, and I was good with it. But this was the first experience where my work ethic and my personality did not help. It seemed to actually make it worse. And so I had one guy on my crew who'd been a firefighter since 1997, so very experienced, very well liked. Everybody loves this guy. Like if I go around and say his name now, they're like, oh man, such a great guy, nice guy, just a nice guy. He didn't have very good work ethic, but he was a very nice guy, and he'd been there a long time. And we all know sometimes if you have a lot of years of experience, you can get away with not cleaning or training or anything like that, just by being present. So he was kind of that guy. And from day one, he wouldn't speak to me. And I was like, okay, I'll just earn it. So I was constantly nice to him. On calls, we got along just great. And, you know, I thought that I was slowly proving myself. I was like, man, he's going to come around, and he's going to, you know, speak to me eventually. But he never did. And it went from he didn't speak to me and nobody noticed, because, you know, we don't make a big deal of those things because we try to keep, you know, we try not to be squeaky wheels, to it was becoming apparent because he was trash talking me. You know, everything I did or said, you know, he'd be like, oh my God, she's so horrible. Like, can you believe she did this? One morning we had a really busy day ahead of us. So I finished checking off the engine and it was filthy, but we had all this other stuff to do. So I was like, let me just quietly wash it and I won't tell anybody. That way we can knock that out. And somehow, like, me doing that by myself was like really awful. You know, I don't know what I said, but that blew up, and, you know, that became a reason for discontent. But it got to the point where if I'd open my mouth, he would scoff, or, you know, he'd do those things. And I wasn't at the position where I was able or ready or willing to defend myself and say, you know, what's your problem? Because I wasn't ready for that, because there were two companies there. And I felt like they would see what was going on and maybe, you know, dude, what's your problem? Get off her. But nobody did that. And the more that nobody did that, the more that I was afraid to stand up for myself. I don't know, I can't explain it. But what I do know is it started to really affect me personally. I felt like there was something wrong with me. I felt like I deserved it. I felt like I was not a good person, because if I was a good person, these good firemen would stand up for me. And one day we had station inspections, and Captain said, hey, can you knock out the compartments first thing, and we'll do whatever. So I told the crew, I was like, hey guys, we're gonna knock out the compartments first thing. And as normal, Tim, you know, he ignored me. He just turned around and walked away. And I was just like, come on, dude. And normally I just let it go because it wasn't worth it. But this day I was like, you know, I'm so sick of this. So I said, Tim, did you hear me? And he just ignored me, got inside the cab, shut the door. And so I opened up the door and I was like, Tim, did you hear me? We need to do the compartments. And I was intent. I wasn't gonna lay off of him today. And he blew up. We ended up going to the office, me, him, and the captain, sitting down talking. And, you know, the captain looked at him and was like, all right, so what's going on? I just don't like her. She's annoying, she's aggravating, nobody likes her, I don't like her, and I don't have to like her. And that was it. That was it, like no other explanation. So I'm just like, wow. You know, so I shrunk up even more, like, man, I'm an unlikable person. And the captain, at the end of that, Tim went back outside. The captain looked at me and was like, look, I see what Tim's doing. I see you don't deserve it, but there's nothing I can do, so just keep doing what you're doing. And he didn't know that he was just telling me that I wasn't worth it. That I wasn't worth it. He didn't know that. Maybe I didn't know that at first, and nobody would really know that, but that's how I took it, was I'm not worth it. So that made it worse. It's funny, the things that we're humiliated by or that we're ashamed of, and one of the biggest things is our acceptance within this fire service. So it was really humiliating for me. I could not call one of my friends that I used to work with and say, yeah, thanks for the congratulations, but they don't like me. They won't talk to me. Like, I couldn't tell people that. I was so humiliated by it that I just kind of kept it to myself and hoped that it would go away. But it didn't, and I got more and more depressed. And as I got more and more depressed, I just kind of pushed people away. I picked fights with people that I was really close to. I got like really annoyed with those people and had silly little fights with them, pushed people away. And before I knew it, like, I was very isolated. Didn't want to go out and hang out with people, didn't want to spend time with people, just wanted to be by myself and be miserable. I'd get off work and go home. Some days on the drive home, I'd just cry because I had spent the 24 hours prior putting on this like really strong face, because we don't let them see us sweat, right? Like, that's the number one rule. Don't let them know they're getting to you, and don't let them see you sweat. So every day I went to work, super smiley, super positive, super happy, super nice, and hoping that this would be the day that things would change. Maybe we'd get like this crazy, terrible call, and we'd all come together as a brotherhood, and I'd be a part of the family. But by the end of the day, that didn't happen. And I got in the car and I just cried because I was so exhausted. So I found myself getting home, getting back in bed most days, and just crying myself to sleep or falling asleep. I would sleep till like lunchtime, even if we didn't run calls. And if you know me, I'm an obsessive, active person. Like last night, yesterday we taught a 2-day class in Henrico, and I drove here and went straight to, what's the name of the trail? Carver's Cove, and I got to mountain bike. It was so fun. So I'm just like a really annoyingly active person. But in this time, I wasn't doing anything. I was just miserable. And so I made an appointment with my primary care physician and had them check my thyroid, because I was like, must be my thyroid that I don't have any energy. So she checked my thyroid, and I was hoping that that would be it, and they'd give me some drugs or fix it, and I'd be back to my old self. My thyroid was normal, and it was like, well, can I try some of those antidepressants? Because those things are really helpful. I've seen commercials. So she hooked me up with some antidepressants, and I took them for a few weeks, and I think the side effects were just more than I wanted, and nothing was happening. I hear you have to take them for like 2 months to help. But I didn't like the side effects. So I went back and I was like, these don't work for me. Can I take some more antidepressants? Do you have other ones? So she gave me some other ones, and I tried them for a little while, and they didn't help. Luckily and fortunately for me, one of my closest friends that I got into like multiple fights with during this, he didn't give up on me. I think he detected something was wrong, because he kept calling. And we know the more we isolate ourselves, the more people forget about us. Because the world is a very busy world. And in public safety, we know a lot of people. Just think about some of your close friends that you haven't talked to in a while. You're like, oh crap, I haven't called them in forever. I just forgotten them. And that's kind of what happened to me. The more I isolated myself, the more people just kind of fell off, and I didn't hear from people anymore. But this one friend, Brian, he called like weekly. And each time when he called, I'd just kind of blow him off or be like, no, I don't feel like it, leave me alone, hang up the phone. And I don't know what was up, but one day he called, and he got me in the perfect moment, because I just let it all out. I was bawling. I was like, I'm so miserable. I'm so depressed. This is what's happening at work, and I can't take it anymore. And I told him everything. Can we cuss? Because it's like, what? And his response was, I am so sorry, that fucking sucks. And it sounds so simple, but that was all I needed to hear to lift like the weight off my shoulders and make me feel for the first time that it wasn't my fault. Like somehow, just in his simple way of saying, I am so sorry, and being empathetic and being sincere, that fucking sucks. Like, to hear him say that, I realized, wait, it's not my fault, Brian? I don't deserve this? You don't deserve this. You are a good person. You are a hardworking person. They deserve this, not you. And it was like, wait, you mean it's their fault, not mine? And it's amazing. I can step back and look at the whole situation right now and realize that Tim was intimidated by something in me, and he took it out on me. But in that moment when it was happening, I couldn't see that. It was me. It was, I'm a piece of crap. I deserve this. I'm not a good person. And it was hurtful. It was so hurtful. I mean, to the point where I started thinking about suicide. It would come to my mind often, and I couldn't explain it. At first, it would just pop in my mind. I'd be like, oh, this is a really bad thought. I shouldn't think this way. Like, and if I let anybody know I'm thinking this way, whew, things will be really bad. To the point where it started to come a lot. And then to the point where I was able to rationalize it, that I'm miserable, my life sucks, and this is a solution, and it's my choice. And if I want to make this decision, nobody has the right to stop me. That was my mentality. So with that mentality, I knew that I couldn't let anybody know. Because if I let anybody know that I was depressed and thinking about suicide, they might stop me. And then I would lose that power. The one thing that I had power over now, I'd lose it, and I didn't want to lose it. So I made sure that nobody could tell I was depressed. I made sure to be even happier, even more positive, even, whatever. But thank God for Brian. Thank God for him being there and letting me talk and talk through it and realize that it wasn't my fault, that I didn't deserve it. Because if not for that, I don't know what I would have done or where that would have led me. Also, everything just comes together in a beautiful way, because I also had just started my second semester of graduate school, and I had an assignment. It was called Action Research. So find an area where current practices are not best practices, research it, and help develop better practices. That was the assignment. And I was still like super gung-ho. I'm going to save the fire service. I went to FDIC for the first time and saw all these movers and shakers, and I was like, man, I'm gonna make a difference in the fire service. So I emailed our safety chief and said, hey, what's a good topic that I could research and be cutting edge with something? And I was thinking it was gonna be like smoothbore versus fog. I don't know how to compare that in your words world. 9mm or 45, or a SIG 40, no recoil. Maybe. I don't know. I don't think it's that extreme. But, I'm thinking that, or something with RIT or laddering, just something tactical in the fire service. And Chief Hobson came back and said, hey, can you look into firefighter suicide? And I was like, what? Does he know something? But I got into it. I decided to get into it. And one of the first articles I pulled up was the research that Dr. Sabia did, where she looked at every death certificate of every firefighter in North Carolina from 1984 to 1999. And she compared line of duty deaths to suicides. And that's where we found that a firefighter was 3 times more likely to die by suicide than in the line of duty, through her looking at every single death certificate. What's interesting about that data is, think about 1984 to 1999. How many people were raised that suicide is a sin? Yeah. How many people know somebody close to your family who died by suicide? How many people remember how they were treated and how their family was treated by that? How many people did it become an embarrassment? Oh, that's good, not too many, but so suicide I was raised it's a sin. Only God can take life because God gives life. Suicide is really, really bad. So 1984, 1999, it was even more stigmatized than it is today. Today, we're willing to understand it, and we're willing to honor people who died by suicide. Then we didn't. So imagine how many of those death certificates were listed as accidental or unintentional, especially for first responders. The evidence-based literature says for police officers and firefighters, if we were to die by suicide, more than likely the investigation will say accidental, unintentional, because you guys are trying to take care of the family. You think that by saying accidental or unintentional, life insurance will pay, they'll be honored and all that other stuff. Also, well, we'll talk about it when we go a little further. Yeah, I won't get into it now, but she also ran into a bunch of death certificates that were listed as confidential and classified, so she wasn't able to open them. So I wonder how many of those were suicides. So even though we did get the data 3-to-1, it's imperfect data for 2 reasons. Improperly classified, the ones that were closed, and then also she compared suicides of career firefighters in North Carolina to line of duty deaths of career and volunteer. And volunteer firefighters make up 70% of firefighters. So she took a much bigger population of line of duty deaths and compared it to a much smaller population of career. So we don't really know what that data is. So I'm gonna get rolling. This presentation is almost 2 hours, and then the peer support one is almost 2 hours. So we'll take a very short break in the middle of this one. If you guys can please keep it short so we can get through it all. And if you give up on the peer support, you can just leave. But we'll try to keep that first break super short, and I'll try to talk kind of fast, but not too fast.